Well, hi everybody. My name is Rick Molina.
Hello, welcome to the Arizona Peer and Family Career Academy. I am joined today by Rick Molina, who works for Maricopa County, and he's going to do a presentation on why tobacco still matters. Also, shout out to him. It is his birthday. I'm going to go over a few logistics, and then we will do some more introductions and time to share about this great work and why we still need to talk about tobacco with our members and our staff. Just as a reminder, if you are on mute, we ask that you stay on mute unless you are asking a question. And if you do have a question, to raise your digital hand first, and please feel free to utilize the chat box. We would love it if you would introduce yourself in the chat with your name, your title, the organization that you are with, and how old were you when you first tried nicotine? That will be our icebreaker for today. I know for me, I was 13 when I first had my cigarette, but I was getting secondhand smoke probably long before that. But I know for me, that was the first time. But these days, nicotine looks different, right? With vaping and stuff. So whatever that was for you, love to find out. How old were you when you first started that journey, if you ever did? Our mission here at PFCA is to inspire recovery and wellness through professional development and continuing education in order to equip emerging leaders and strengthen the peer and family support workforce. We have lots of different trainings available that we offer all throughout the year. Ethics and boundaries, navigating the justice system, tackling the opioid use crisis, self-care, trauma-informed care, motivational interviewing, and lunch and learns, just like this one. So I want to thank you for joining, and hopefully we will see you in future trainings. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Rick Molina from Maricopa County. Happy birthday, Rick, and thank you for joining us today.
All right, thank you for having me. What I'll do is I'll share my screen first to pull up this presentation. Okay, so my name is Rick Molina. I'm from the Maricopa County Department of Public Health, and I work in the Office of Tobacco Prevention and Cessation. Big part of what I do is I reach out to organizations that are serving our vulnerable populations, and I try to work with them on developing tobacco strategies that will help them to help their clients quit using tobacco. So the presentation I have today is pretty much geared towards, I guess, painting the picture of why tobacco still matters and why we need to talk about it, especially with our behavioral health populations. They already have a mortality rate higher than the general population, and tobacco is a contributing factor to that. So one thing I want to do is, usually a lot of people don't value tobacco as, or they don't see it as something that's harmful. And I think a big part of it is because it's legal, but there's also cultural elements. So what I want to do is show some statistics that show that the populations that we're serving, if we're serving, say, for instance, behavioral health populations, how tobacco is, it's making an impact on them that's worse than the general population. So first, what we have is a slide from the CDC. And if we look, smoking is more prevalent in adults 25 to 64 years of age. It's more prevalent in populations that have lower education, that are below the poverty level, that are on Medicaid. And in the state of Arizona, Medicaid is access. And then we also have disabled and psychological distress. So one thing to notice is with our behavioral health populations, a lot of them share these same characteristics. You know, a lot of them are not just lower education, but they're also below the poverty level. They're also on Medicaid. They also have psychological distress. So this slide right here is important. And this is one of the things that changed my mind. And just for a little background, I worked in behavioral health for about 10 years before I came into public health. So I was a case manager for the severely mentally ill population. And I remember they would try to give us the fax forms for the Ashline. So if a client wanted to quit, we could sign them up through the Ashline fax form. And I remember thinking, I don't have time to do the fax form. I have a client that's in the lobby waiting for me to find what place to stay. I'm doing an intake on somebody. We have somebody that's in jail. We're trying to register somebody to go into a residential treatment program, and the list goes on and on. I didn't have time to do tobacco referral, and had somebody explained to me why tobacco was important, it might have changed my mind. And this right here is what changed my mind. If you look on the left, you see the deaths by AIDS, alcohol, suicide, homicide, accidents, fires, and other drugs. Tobacco kills more than all of those combined. And so that's important because when we're working with clients, especially say in the behavioral health world, right, a lot of things are immediate needs, right? Like say somebody's suicidal, right? We're going to stop what we're doing and we're going to help this person. If somebody's severely mentally ill and they're not on their meds, we're going to start working on that right now. If somebody's using heroin, right, we're going to start working on that right now. And so tobacco kind of falls behind all of those things. But if we look in the longer term, not, in the immediate term, we have immediate needs, right? But in the longer term, tobacco is affecting our populations that we're serving at this scale. So once again, AIDS, alcohol, suicide, homicide, accidents, fires, and other drugs, tobacco kills more people than all of those together. So if we look right here, the smoking rates have decreased since 1965. Back then we were at a 42% level, and in 2018 we're at 13.7%. This slide right here shows tobacco in relation to behavioral health. So those without serious psychological distress, right? If we look from 1997 to 2011, we see almost a 6-point drop, right? 24.1% all the way down to 18.2%. If you look at the top, that's a population with serious psychological distress. That number is pretty much unchanged. From 1997, it goes from 43.6% to 42.1%. So it wasn't even a point. So the point here is that while the general population is seeing decreases in smoking rates, the behavioral health population has pretty much gone unchanged. And in a world where it's so prevalent and the mortality rates are higher, it's amazing that we don't even talk about tobacco, and at that, staff that are serving these populations don't value giving clients the opportunity to quit tobacco, even by just having the education or making a referral. So now these are some statistics of tobacco by ethnicity. If we see on the bottom, the Native American population has a higher smoking rate than the rest of the ethnicities. They smoke at a 27.1% higher rate. Asians have a lower smoking rate. We look at insurance, those that are on Medicaid, and like I said, Medicaid in Arizona is access, and those that are uninsured smoke at a 23.9% rate. Tobacco by income, those that fall under the $35,000 a year mark smoke at a higher rate at 21.3%. And I would argue that a lot of our population, our behavioral health populations, have a lower incomes than $35,000 a year. Some of them are probably at the poverty level. And then if we look right here, the general population of adults smokes at a 14% rate. And if we look at the red bar right there, that's justice involved adults. So anybody that's involved in the justice system, whether it be jail or probation, they're smoking at an 80% rate compared to the general population. So now if we look at tobacco use by mental health, the illicit drug use, they smoke at 25.3%, mental illness 34.6%, major depression 59%, alcohol use 63.5%, and these numbers just explode from here. If they have a bipolar disorder, they're smoking at an 83% rate, and if they have schizophrenia, they're smoking at a 90% rate. So, if you put up these statistics together now too, right, justice involved individuals smoking at a higher rate than the general population. But then if that person has behavioral health issues, say with a schizophrenia diagnosis, right now these statistics are intersecting. Like I said, the schizophrenia population smokes at a 90% rate. So another connection to mental health is that smoking can hinder the effectiveness of the medications that are taken. Some of the most common ones that I've seen clients on are Thorazine, Haldol, Zyprexa, Geodon, Cymbalta, and these are medications that can be affected by tobacco use. Tobacco use affects your body's ability to process the medications. So another thing about mental health is that doing or smoking cessation doesn't interfere with treatment for mental health. And I know that there's a misconception of, if you take away, say for example, if somebody's using drugs, right, and we take away the drugs, it's viewed that if you take away tobacco, that's the last thing, and we can't do that. But the data shows that those things can coexist, and it doesn't actually hinder tobacco treatment doesn't hinder substance abuse treatment. And then smoking cessation is also associated with reduced depression, anxiety, and stress. So symptoms of anxiety are very similar to symptoms of tobacco withdrawal. So if we look at anxiety, it's anxiety can be feeling agitated, feeling restless, tense muscles, insomnia, panic attacks. And if we look at withdrawals from tobacco or even drugs in general, right, we have the same thing: anxiety, restlessness, frustration, anger. So, another misconception is that when people are smoking, we're calming them down, or that they need the smoke to calm down. And part of this is true, because if they're a heavy smoker and they're withdrawing, then they're going to have anxiety, and then smoking the cigarette it alleviates the anxiety. So what we're really doing is we're covering up the withdrawals from the drug. It's not actually coping with anxiety. So here's I created some videos for you guys to watch, just so that way it's not death by PowerPoint, but these are some of my experiences with tobacco and working in the behavioral health population. I remember working in a detox facility before the tobacco-free laws were implemented in 2011. Clients would become very anxious, as most of them were withdrawing from alcohol, opiates, or benzodiazepines. Anxiety and agitation are actually common withdrawal symptoms of these drugs. What we never used to take into account is that in many cases, these clients were withdrawing from nicotine as well. In my 9 years of experience, it was rare to have clients that used hard drugs but didn't smoke tobacco. They usually used both. I remember in detox, there was always a situation. A client would have a bad conversation with a friend or a family member over the phone. They would become agitated during group counseling and walk out of the group. They could become frustrated with their discharge planning options. It was also common for clients to threaten to leave detox. Detox can be very stressful. And what do we do in these situations? We would offer them cigarettes to calm them down, which was an illusion. From a behavioral perspective, we were teaching them to cope with their anxiety, anger, and agitation in an indirect, unhealthy way. And this is what they were walking out of detox with. Imagine that. After all of the group therapy and one-on-one counseling sessions, one of the biggest coping skills they walked out of detox with was smoking a cigarette to calm down. But the real illusion is that the nicotine wasn't calming them down. It was alleviating their withdrawals. Now, can nicotine help withdrawals? Absolutely. And clients have the option to receive patches and other safe alternatives to cope with nicotine withdrawals in the treatment setting. What we're not doing is teaching them to smoke a cigarette to cope with their anxiety anymore. But the overall message is that tobacco and anxiety are associated, and more often than not, because the client is physically dependent to nicotine. And I'm sure you're wondering what happened in 2011. Well, I was working in detox just before the ban. My colleagues and me, we were all concerned that this would create a chaotic detox environment for our clients. I'm sure some of you remember this time period. Clients and even staff are so dependent on nicotine to solve our behavioral issues on the unit instead of working through the situation without a smoke. And what was the end result? When the tobacco was finally banned, we did exactly that. We started teaching clients to cope using healthy coping skills instead of using another drug. The clients that showed up to detox from drugs didn't leave because they couldn't smoke. And the ones that did leave likely would have left anyways. I remember working in it. Yeah, so that's my experience with smoking is that taking away smoking from the treatment process doesn't hinder the progress of the clients. And we used to think that it would. And, I'm living experience. It doesn't. And the two things can go hand in hand because quitting smoking and quitting drugs, the skills that you need to do either one, they can reinforce each other. So another good reason to quit smoking is financial health. The average cost of a pack of cigarettes is actually closer to $8 now, not $6.96. But at $8, that's $240 a month, and that's $2,880 a year. And after 10 years of smoking, that's $28,000. A study of smokers with schizophrenia estimated that median spending on cigarettes was 27% of monthly incomes. And I've done this myself. I've worked with clients that were on Social Security, and they'd maybe get $70 a week. And we go to the store, and the first thing these clients would do, and some in particular, would buy a carton of cigarettes, and that carton ran about $35, something like that, and they would have about $35 for the rest of the week of groceries. And I try to tell my clients, like, let's buy the things that you need first, and then whatever you have left over, spend it on the cigarettes. But it was always the other way around. It was the cigarette carton first, and then everything else. And that created problems because about halfway through the week, that carton was gone, and they had no food. And now we have a crisis situation. So it's definitely motivating to save money if clients can add up how much they're spending on cigarettes. All right, here's another video for my experiences.
In fortunate circumstances, housing is arranged for clients releasing from jail. Oftentimes, these homes or facilities allow smoking, but in designated areas. A lot of times, clients start smoking again and often place tobacco as a higher priority than other essential needs. In the case of residential housing, clients are provided with services to help them budget, do chores, cook, and clean. This can be a great point in a client's process to introduce tobacco cessation, as it falls in line with budgeting and prioritizing needs, which are skills that they need for the long term. Though tobacco in the short term isn't the most harmful thing they can be doing, if we take a step back, those with behavioral health conditions die about 5 years earlier from smoking-related illnesses in the general population, and those with serious mental health disorders die about 15 years earlier. So it makes sense to at least make sure that we are screening and providing tobacco cessation services when appropriate. Also, it is not uncommon for clients to jeopardize housing because of tobacco use. In my experience, tobacco wasn't always the driving factor, but definitely a contributing factor, and one that can stick, as zero tolerance is usually included in lease signings.
So, and that's another point too. Whenever our clients are signing these lease signings for, say, HUD housing, there's zero smoking policies, and especially with the severely mentally ill, they tend to smoke a lot wherever they're at, and that's something that they can pin down on the client. So that's another good reason to for our clients to quit. So now 70 to 80% of individuals receiving substance use disorder treatment have expressed an interest in tobacco cessation. Smokers with behavioral health conditions want to quit and can quit. And then 50 to 70% of justice involved smokers want to and have tried to quit. So the takeaway right here is that even though our clients are smoking, most of them have actually thought about quitting, and most of them have tried to quit. And the problem, though, is that if we're not having the conversations with our clients, we're not giving them the education, and most importantly, if we're not letting them know what resources they have available to them, they might not ever get around to quitting.
Now, I'm speaking on my experiences with the high needs SMI population, but I think these experiences apply to the general population as well. Of course, we tried to do everything we could to prevent incarceration, but when it did happen, we saw this as an opportunity to engage with the client on an unusual level. When clients go to jail, they can't use drugs, they can't use tobacco products, and they're flagged to take their psychiatric medications. And when they're in jail, they get significant sober time under their belt, as well as psychiatric stabilization time if they have mental health needs. Before they come out, they are sharper, more stable, and forward-thinking. This was always the time to re-engage and start conversations with them that we otherwise couldn't have. And when they released, I always took a welcome back to society approach. It was part of my way of building a positive rapport with my clients. And I would stop by a Circle K or a Burger King so the client could get something that they haven't had in a while. Eventually, I stopped because more often than not, they were just getting tobacco. And a client starting smoking again after they haven't smoked for months is not a good situation in the car. And clients not only found my experiences funny, but actually respected my position after I explained my experiences. So once again, a client not getting tobacco wasn't a derailing factor in the treatment process.
So again, that speaks to, the idea of, that smoking is gonna hinder the process, the treatment process, right? And in a lot of my experiences, it really doesn't. Even if it was as simple as I'm picking somebody up from jail, and I eventually, like I said, got tired of buying cigarettes because if they haven't smoked in a while, they get really dizzy and then they would throw up in my car. And I used to think that it would be a problem if I told my clients, like, they can't buy cigarettes and smoke before they get in the car. They actually, they enjoyed my stories and they respected me. And, we never had problems because the client couldn't smoke. So quitting smoking, just like substance abuse, it's a marathon, not a sprint. It can take 2 to 14 quit attempts before achieving long-term abstinence. Slips and relapse are normal. So, you can have this conversation with clients and they can try to quit, but that doesn't mean that they're going to quit, forever. We never know what that's going to happen. But what's important is that they have the education and that they know themselves that it might not be the last time, but if they keep trying, then they can get better at it. And we call that practice quitting. So, but just like substance use, right? You never know when that last time they use is going to be, right? But you encourage them to quit. And that's the same approach we want to have with tobacco.
In behavioral health, we always had an open door policy. No matter how many times a client came into detox, we embraced them. The idea being that someday they will enroll for the last time before going into long-term recovery. We never knew when that time would be, but we knew every time a client came in for services that we were always ready to help. Quitting smoking in comparison is similar in that it takes people multiple attempts to quit on average, and we never know when that last quit attempt will be. And once again, as far as the client, quitting tobacco doesn't have to be a burden to the process. The skills needed to quit tobacco actually reinforce the skills needed to stay sober.
So if we look here, evidence-based treatment for tobacco shows that therapy in combination with nicotine replacement therapy is the best combination for success. So nicotine replacement therapy could be like the gum or the lozenges or the patches, right? And so just like substance use, if you're quitting heroin, right, and then you get into an outpatient Suboxone program, the best way to go through it is you want to get therapy, and then you want to detox off of the heroin, right? With say Suboxone. So the combination of the two is most effective, right? And the same thing is for tobacco. The combination of therapy and the combination of nicotine or the nicotine replacement therapy provides a higher success rate. So this slide, I like to share this a lot, and I think it really speaks to how we've really grown in healthcare. Once upon a time, our clients would come in, and if they had depression, right, we would just treat them for depression. If they came in and they were coming off of heroin, right, we would get them off of the heroin, and that was it. Nowadays, if a client comes in and says, say the client's depressed and the client's homeless and the client has they don't have an income, we treat everything together nowadays. So a lot of our behavioral health organizations like one-stop shops and peer support actually play a big role in that process. So if we look right here, environmental, spiritual, social, occupational, financial, intellectual, we're treating clients as a whole now, and tobacco can be part of this process. It doesn't have to be a separate thing. So that's pretty much what I have for the presentation, and I'm hoping that I change your mind with some of these statistics, because like I said, the behavioral health population is it's more affected than the general population, and their mortality rates are higher. So I think I know that this warrants at least having these conversations before tobacco, and at least giving them the education and letting them know that there's resources if they need help.
Thank you, Rick, for that insightful presentation. I really appreciate it, and you sharing all of that knowledge and statistics. Some of that I wasn't aware of either. For those of us that are with us and joining virtually, I want to highlight a few upcoming events we have at PFCA. We have a new course, Understanding the Justice Experience, which is really understanding what is it like inside of jails and prisons for those of us that don't have that lived life experience, so we can support others. It also goes into depth each of the court processes and what does that look like as someone is moving along that journey, and then preparing for re-entry and special considerations for that course. We also have our motivational leadership supervisor course to prepare us to be the best leaders we can be for our behavioral health workforce. We have our motivational interviewing course, as well as technology to promote wellness. I want to thank you for being with us today. I hope that you will stay in contact with us. Please sign up for our newsletter, as well as like us on social media. This is my contact information. You can always email me at haley@azpfca.org or call us, and that'll lead right to me. And so that way, if you do have any questions or support or training needs, we can meet those. I want to thank you, Rick, again for presenting with us today. Much appreciated you sharing your knowledge and expertise.
Thank you for having me.